All right, my friends, welcome to the WriteNow Writers Group. Uh, we're like, welcome. That's our new friend down there, Crazy Dragon.
Yeah, there we go. That's a good one. I love it.
Like, well, we fixed any problems we've had in the community. We've put a dragon on it.
See, there's your proof.
Oh man, I don't even know what's on my mind for writing today because I haven't been able to write yet. Because I've been so busy. Have you guys been able to get any work done at all today?
Well,
Mm.
not today, but from I've been helping my mom with recovering from knee surgery. But when I have been writing, I've been working on my newest work, To Haven's Edge, which is my first romance, which is going to be interesting.
That's so interesting because I know you've really been in sci-fi for a little while. You've been like
I've
sci-fi.
been
and
going
fan
between
fiction, right?
sci-fi and fantasy for ever. But I finally decided to try a romance, and my other writing group was really excited about that. And I
Okay.
actually created a mock cover. So anyone
Mhm.
who goes onto the Discord and looks in the art, my mock cover is up.
Ooh, that's super exciting. I'll pull it up in just a little bit. And actually, I think this is the question that's on my mind is genre. I'd love to talk about some genre elements because I know I'm tend to be fantasy, but then I end up doing a lot of work for clients that are in a range of different genres. So I end up doing it's funny because I write obviously fantasy predominantly, and then we did a little bit of sci-fi and supernatural recently. But then I end up helping a lot of clients with other genres. So I've done like a lot of work in horror, thriller, supernatural, romance, did a memoir, did a nonfiction. It's kind of interesting, but I keep expecting people to be like, okay, well, I need help with fantasy. No, just kidding. Oh man. But so I would say I'm actually very curious to hear Crazy Soul. I'd love to have a talk about like what genre is your favorite and like why you guys are writing in your genre. So I'm gonna pose that question to you. But before we do, let me quickly welcome you to the Right Now community. We are in Right Now Writers Group and meeting 21. We are just a bunch of crazy writers getting together to just chat about all things writing. So, we're going to be chatting about writing today, random writing conversations. If there's something that you want to talk about or something you really want to pose to the community, drop a comment. We'll bring it up and we'll see what is on our minds. And then make sure you stick around. We're going to be doing a couple writing sprints in just a little bit. So, that and more to come. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kaufman, and I am on a mission to help the writers of the world with the process, lifestyle, and mindset. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. And then I have my friends. I'll let you guys intro yourselves.
So I'm Chat Soul. I think everybody knows me at this point. I used to like really focus on fan fiction, and then last month I worked on the Hermes the Cat story for the adventure Right Now, and I'm still working on the game and stuff. But this week I've kind of taken a little bit of a pause to help out some family members and start a romance book. So kind of delving into a new genre there. I usually do fantasy and sci-fi, but going a little out of
romance is definitely on your mind right now.
Yeah.
My genre question, we're going to come back to that in just a second because I'm actually really curious. I have some romance questions now, but Crazy, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, crazy root beer here. And as for genre, I'm mostly. I don't know what exactly you would call it, so I'll just say like action adventure type, with superheroes and villains type deals. Not like superheroes with capes, but just heroes out of nowhere. I do put a bit of romance and some characters if need be, which so far I have. So I kind of
like we have romance elements.
yes, we do have romance elements, some scary elements depending on the book that you're reading, and some funny elements. Just all the elements into one, depending on what book you're reading.
Well, and I absolutely love that because I think for a lot of writers, I think obviously we have our main genre, but I think there's always a lot of sub elements and sub genres that get mixed into it. Now, before I touch into that, I just really want to welcome Bobby. Glad to have you here in the stream with us, my friend. Megan, welcome, welcome. I was telling Soul and Crazy this. I love hopping into the stream and seeing that you guys have already like few conversations ahead of me. And it feels like I'm like got to come like catch up with you guys, and I love it. I mean, like, Kaufman will be on time. My 2025 New Year's resolution, the only one it's going to be is just be like, all right, be on time to your streams. It's going to be my New Year's resolution.
And
outside of all the other, exactly. And if I can't do it, I just have to put a dragon on it.
Or a dragon will come after you and whoop ya.
Oh man, I see you guys at Megan, Bobby. I see you guys were talking about some video games: Pokemon, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Persona. Kingdom Hearts was always one of my favorites, by the way. I loved Kingdom Hearts. Definitely loved it. Who doesn't love Disney and Final Fantasy? But
I've never actually played Kingdom Hearts.
Well, I'm sorry that that your childhood missed out on a huge heart-shaped hole called the Keyblade. But, and then Megan's like, and I did mention they got Pegasus and Dragons in Storyville chat. Dragons.
I really can't wait to see that.
Absolutely approve of that. And then I know I saw some more of you guys hopping in here when I can catch up on chat. Let's see. I saw Lynn. Welcome, welcome, my friend. Glad to have you in here. And Mary, what's up? Hi, everyone. Reading through some of these. I'm not a fan of video games either. Played one, but not really my thing. Totally understandable. I have a lot of friends who like aren't into gaming at all. I've always loved gaming from the storytelling aspect. And I think when I was really young, my dad, like, I remember he got us like he had like the big like Macintosh computer, and then got us hooked on what was that? Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft when we were like really young. But it was like the old school ones for any gamers out there. The OG Blizzard when it was still a good company. And then welcome, Tiara. Glad to have you in here, my friend. Welcome, welcome. Lynn's like, yay, romance questions. Lynn approves. I love that. And I think it's because genre has been on everyone's mind. Hey, what's up, Courtney? A long time no chat, my friend. But I posed this question to you. And I threw it down in the chat. What is your favorite genre and why? Now, of course, before we get to it, we, of course, have to welcome our other writing friend to the stream. Welcome, welcome, Penelope.
Oh, yeah. Let's go.
You're just in time.
Girl.
How's everybody doing tonight?
We literally just finished our intros.
Okay.
I have a really good. So Penelope, you can like intro yourself real quick.
No, I need no introduction.
Fair. Very fair.
You're like, all right, Miss Hartley here in the stream. But so this is the question that's been on my mind though today.
Okay.
What is your favorite genre and why? Because like you guys know I'm a fantasy nerd, but I've been working in so many different other genres. And for some reason, romance, fantasy are always the two main genres, at least in the past couple of years, that readers prefer. And I think romantasy has become a very, very prevalent genre. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Favorite genre and why?
I think mine actually might be sci-fi. I mean, I know I grew up on Lord of the Rings because my mom was a huge fan, and I got into it, I think a little more than her. And of course, Harry Potter. But I think I really do. There's a series out there. God, I can't think of the author right now. Uglies, Uglies, Pretty Specials, and then Extras. I think that's actually the reason I got so into sci-fi. I actually used to read that series, and I actually used to design my own hoverboard. And for the longest time, I actually wanted to go into robotics so I could actually build that myself. I still have the design somewhere.
Wow, that is so cool. That is so cool. A hoverboard. Man, I want to go on a hoverboard. This sounds fun.
Plus, I was a huge fan of Treasure Planet. And oh my God, to actually build a solar surfer, that would be so awesome.
Oh man, that's absolutely awesome. By the way, Gorkorn, welcome, my friend. You're like, I love high fantasy, but it has to be more in the direction of chaos, slowly taking over the reality of the world.
You're speaking my language, my
I
friend.
know. I knew this was going to go down to crazy.
Yes.
Oh man,
I love
crazy.
it.
Are you a high fantasy fan or a fantasy?
A little bit, but I'm more into like the dark stories and mystery stories that have
Dark
this
and mystery. So your
twists
story
and
has to have
turns,
like a really good like mystery that you have to be able to solve by the end of it.
if you can.
Ooh, if you can, you're like if you can. I guess that's always the question. If you can solve the mystery. And once again, I know I've said this before, guys, but for some reason, on all the critique shows that I've done, out of the 150 shows that I've done on the critique show so far, the number one genre that viewers watch the longest is always thrillers. Thrillers and mysteries, people will always watch. The other ones, fantasy, sci-fi, romance, children's, hit or miss depending on the audience, but everybody always sticks around for the mystery thriller. So if that says anything about what people want to watch, like, I don't know. I'm like, it's kind of interesting. I know Courtney was like, my favorite genre is, no surprise to anyone who knows me, romance with all the smut and love reading about people that deal with difficult things and overcome it. Because who doesn't love a good a story about like people having to really overcome life's difficult hardships? I love that. I just need it set to dragons and wizards and warlocks and the elves, whatever we want to put in there, blood elves, Oh man, I know. I remember I would have this debate with my with friends at some point. They're like, why can't you just do more like read more like stuff that takes place in the real world? And I'm like, well, because I already live in the real world. I want to read stuff that's not in the real world.
Yeah.
Get you out of the real world.
But like but the genres and stories that take place in the real world, so popular, extremely popular. And hence I think there's a reason where there's that mix between fantasy, obviously generally outside of the real world, romance, which of course romance can always take place in like fictitious worlds, but I think romance tends to be more in the real world at times, until you go into subgenres. But hard to say. I'm not as familiar with current genre trends. Maybe some of you guys here in the chat can speak to it. Does romance genre, like current trends, is it usually taking place in the real world, or are we more in like fantastical supernatural worlds?
I feel like I see that more in the non-reality stuff, or if it is in reality, it's always like supernatural within reality kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. And maybe that's why the romantasy genre is so popular as like a subgenre, because it's like that kind of like healthy mix of like kind of get a fantastical world, but I still get the romance as the A or the B plot, which is interesting. I know Megan was like, fantasy is the top genre because anything is possible. Like, that's interesting, right? Because then it's like, okay, any fantastical rule can happen. There are magical creatures and magical reigns supreme. And romance can have romance a lot of times will use elements of magic. It's just done in generally a different way. Whereas fantasy readers expect a badass magic system of something they can like understand and get behind. Romance readers expect a badass romance that they can either get into, hopefully it happens, hopefully it doesn't, fantasize, whatever. So I think it's just slightly different expectations. Now I think when you cross those two together, badass magic system, badass romance, romantasy is born. Megan's like, plus who doesn't love animated musicals and musicals happening in fantasy stories if possible? I mean, there's a reason Disney movies have always worked for so long. People love Disney characters singing about true love and the villain. Like, it's a very, very big concept.
There's actually a new movie out that it's not a Disney movie, but it has about as much music in it as a Disney movie. It's called Spellbound. It's this cute little movie on Netflix. But I think
I almost saw that actually. I almost watched it. Is it
I
cute?
think it's got like 4, maybe 5 songs. It's got some deep themes though, and literally one of them is parents getting divorced, which I thought was interesting for a kids movie. But it's actually like about like growing up, maturing. So the songs kind of revolve around that, and I mean it's cute. But yeah, no, yeah, people definitely love the animated singing, especially when there's some kind of weird fantastical creature that's taking part in it somehow.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I know Lynn was saying I almost exclusively read romance with a sprinkling of science fiction. Like, all right, so Lynn, you're accepting science fiction. I'm surprised because I feel like it's always romance and fantasy. Seems to go more exclusively together than science fiction. But that could just be me. I don't know. By the way, Susan, welcome. What were you gonna say, Sol?
Did Sol, were you gonna say something?
No.
Oh no, maybe it was you.
Okay, it was me. That reminds me of that fantasy sci-fi romance. So I was reading this anthology of Dracula stories, and one of them was written by a woman with the last name Asimov. So I was thinking like Isaac Asimov's offspring or something, like related somehow to it. So I was expecting this really science-y. Yeah, it is bioengineered humans and vampires in space. Is what it was like. But I mean, it was like, it was so funny because it was a romance, but it was the most logical romance. I mean, Spock would have been like, interesting. Like, it was the most logical romance I've ever seen played out. It is like, we are the last 2 humans and human bioengineered entities in the universe. Perhaps we should procreate. Like, it was just so weird. It was very like you get to, it was like, perhaps it wasn't procreate, but perhaps we should fall in love. And like, I mean, but it was so like, not stiff, but just like, I could imagine 2 socially awkward people, like, who are big nerds saying that to each other. Like, I'm not saying anything bad about it. Like, I'm a socially awkward nerd, so I speak for myself when I say like the romance.
Socially awkward nerd here.
Awkward, right? Like,
all right, if you're a socially awkward nerd in the community, raise your hand.
Socially awkward nerd married to a socially awkward nerd.
So it does happen in real life.
Yes, it does.
So it wasn't just a fantasy Dracula in space story. I mean, it was just like, it was so funny because it was like, don't judge a book by a cover. Don't judge a writer by their last. Oh yeah, no, this is totally an Asimov. Yeah.
Oh man. But you know what's interesting? And I don't know, maybe we always just assume that people read one type of genre. But I think a lot of readers probably cross X amount of genres, or maybe read a variety of genres than just like the core one. Like television, I feel like television, we watch a variety of television shows or movies, people who stream. But I don't know if there's always that same range for reading or not. What do you guys think? Okay.
I didn't answer your other question because my answer was going to be something like, I'm pan genre. I literally, if you looked at me during that whole like I was sitting here sweating bullets, like just one. Like, I'm looking at my bookshelf, like I'm thinking about things that I've read, and I'm like, no, I can't answer that. Like
fantasy, supernatural, dark, romance. I read books.
I read books. Yeah, I was like, it is physically impossible. It is against the law of physics for me to answer this question because I will read anything. Like, and I narrowed it down to 2 things. I like writers who are way too clever for their own good and who surprise the heck out of me consistently throughout a book. And I like different things. I like too many different things. But if I'm sitting there reading and I'm like, oh, like if I make that noise, that's the genre I like. Oh, that's my genre. It's my favorite genre. Whatever genre that is. And it's usually like Kurt Vonnegut did it a lot. Like the guy who did Only Cowgirls Get the Blues and Still Life with Woodpecker and Jitterbug Perfume, that guy. But basically anybody who is just like put like a lot of like thought into what they're writing and created a really interesting, engaging story with a lot of really interesting, engaging characters, and things go not too terribly bad. Like, I don't like it when it goes too dark, but I mean, whatever genre that's Penelope Hartley's genre right there. So pretty much anything.
Apparently genre.
Yeah. Ooh.
Courtney agrees. Courtney is like, Penelope is like, my genre is something that makes me feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
my only challenge to that though is, isn't that what all reading sets out to do? Isn't most books or most genres, isn't their goal to make you feel something? Now, whether that feeling is happiness, surprise, shock, delight, disgust, but that's essentially why, isn't that why people generally like reading in the first place, to feel something using their imagination based off what the author is telling them?
I think that's one reason. I think another reason, I know this one was mine, it's an escape from the real world. It lets you live lives.
That's actually a really good question, actually. Why do you read? I'm actually very curious now.
I mean, with me, I will admit, I read because, I mean, I can't travel. I don't have the money to travel. So when I read about characters that they go to these like fantastical places, whether they're real or not, it's like I'm there with them.
Okay.
And it's like, hey, it's traveling without leaving my home. It is awesome. And I get to actually like see these lives, live these lives other characters are doing that I could never have.
Mm-hmm.
And it also kind of lines into why I write as well. It's like, these are lives I could never have. Will you just pick where you're going? It's like lives I could never have, lives I could never live. But that doesn't mean I can't see them.
That's interesting.
So there's this quote, it's attributed to Tolkien on escapism. He says, fantasy is escapist. I can't actually verify this, but I found the meme, I saw it on, so I'm reading it anyway, because the idea is there. Fantasy is escapist, and that is its glory. If a soldier is imprisoned by the enemy, don't we consider it his duty to escape? If we value the freedom of mind and of soul, if we're partisans of liberty, then it's our plain duty to escape and to take as many people with us as we can. Yeah.
I like that.
Like getting out of prison and taking as many people with you as possible. I mean, I think that's like the awesome possibility of storytelling too, is like it can take you to a different place. And for the same reason, like I like fantasy because I love to see the vistas of like places that only exist in the writer's mind, and like, vast mountain, like Lord of the Rings. If it hadn't been filmed, I could have still read the books and gotten, not known that there was a place like that out there, but like been able to experience it. Or like sci-fi, like different, like Doctor Who, with all the different cultures that Doctor Who gets to visit in the series, and you like the cat people of whatever, and like it's just like there's so many cool creative things that I never would have thought of. I don't even have to do the work of creating them myself and making up my own imaginary friends. I can go hang out with somebody else's, and I think that is.
Well, I mean, I think there's also a reason though that Doctor Who is the longest running science fiction show of all time.
Yeah.
Like clearly that's something that people have wanted.
It's tons of heart. It's a lot of cool, like this, the writing is, and the characters always experience, like he's always able to get out of scrapes using his, I mean, he had, like, one of the things they say about him is they didn't give him a gun. They gave him a screwdriver because he fixes things. And that's absolutely the heart of Doctor Who right there.
Which is so crazy because most people would assume that like they give them a tool, at least in a sci-fi or somewhere like that, it would be like some type of like gun or something. Or like fantasy, it would be like a sword. Fantasy would be some type of sword. Who would think of doing a screwdriver, a sonic screwdriver, as like their main weapon, which is just clever.
A screwdriver and a time machine. Go.
Screwdriver and a time machine. The time machine is stuck in the temporal reality looking like a phone box. Yes. Because the budget of that time could afford a phone box. But because the reality is
exactly. It's a police call box because you can call again the call for help. Box, they're confusing in England. I don't know. Like I don't even think they make them anymore. If we did it in America, it'd be like some dude with like a gun standing in like one of those old plastic telephone, like on the Matrix, like it would be like that. That would be our version of Doctor Who.
Gorkorn brings up an interesting point. They're like, honestly, without the funding of the BBC, the last 2 Doctor Who shows would not exist, considering most people didn't seem to like them. They just haven't had the same popularity. I think there's a reason that they had to do a distribution deal with Disney. There's a reason that they're being distributed now through Disney. It's just a change of pacing and volume, right? If people like them, they'll keep making more, at least if they meet the minimum level of quality.
Yeah.
But back to the reading question, though, because we had some really good comments in here. Courtney was saying, I read to make myself feel like I can do something or convince myself that I'm not too damaged to keep going. Reading benefits my mental health. That's awesome. That's phenomenal. Reading is such a tool for improving our mental health. And I think that's actually really, really cool. Thanks for sharing that, Courtney.
It's easier to encounter people that way that may have maybe encountered similar situations to your own, that they're not feeling awkward about sharing it. They're not at a point where it's not safe for them to share it because it's still traumatic or whatever. So it's just easier.
And I think that kind of borderlines with what Mary said. Where it's like, tough question. I like to read as I like to breathe. Not really to escape, to travel in another's mind. I love that. And I think that's one of the coolest things about being a storyteller. It's that you create these characters, these worlds, these concepts, and it all started with your imagination that then you're sharing with other people. A lot of movies, films, and visual media originates with books and with storytelling. It's actually really interesting. There's a reason adaptations are so popular and have been done so consistently for so long. Yeah, I love that. I think even growing up, I think that was one of my first motivations of like, I read a lot of authors that I really loved. And then I was like, I have an overactive imagination. I think I can use my overactive imagination to tell stories that I want to tell. Or these days it's, I've seen other concepts. I think I can do it better in a way that is more self-serving to the story itself. I like to be challenged. That's the gamer in me. I love a challenge, which is why I like to look at things that either work or work all right, and then do those like character ideas or concepts better in a way that like resonates with me deeply. Courtney's like, slap the category fiction on it and I can read all my training. No one will know.
Yep.
There you go, Courtney. I really like that. Right. Let's say you have to like go through like deal with some traumatic event. I would just slap a dragon on it and then it's fantasy. And
there we go.
Not trauma anymore.
There we go. You said it.
Be like, all right, dealing with my worst trauma in my life. All right, car accident. No, it was riding a dragon. There we go. Now nobody will ever know the difference. Oh man.
Yeah, I think I can sympathize with that. I did that with one of my characters, and I'm kind of doing it with another. So
I love that. Do you guys usually infuse your like real life experiences into your stories? Like, do you will you copy like the real life experiences, almost like concept or thing by thing that happened? Maybe change like names or elements. I'm kind of curious.
I will admit with Kasai, the exact experience that caused my PTSD, like both of them, I did not put with Kasai's life. But the fact that he did go through crap that really screwed him up unknowingly, and then he just finally had a breakdown. Yeah, no, that was me. I felt bad after I wrote it, and it's like, I'm so sorry for doing this.
Oh, did it feel like it helped though after the fact, after writing it and then kind of like rereading it? So there must have been like a level of like therapy to it, having been able to externalize.
Funny enough, I actually mentioned that to my therapist, and between the both of us, we actually figured out that my writing is a lot more therapeutic than I realized, because we talked about this after I started writing my fan fictions, after I had my almost 200K count, like a month and a half. And then I'm just like, wait a minute. I'm gonna reread like all of my crap, and then I'm rereading it all, and it's like, oh god, I'm putting everything into this. But hey, it actually did work because, while granted, Kasai hasn't recovered fully from what he's gone through, so I can't learn from his. There's been a couple of them that either they kind of recovered, or in one character's case, somebody close to him kind of found closure.
Okay.
And it did kind of help me in a way, because it's like, I didn't go through this specific event, but I know these feelings, I know these emotions. If I can write the character to deal with them this way, maybe I can do the same myself.
Oh, that's actually, so that's like really powerful. That's a really powerful statement. Thank you for sharing that first off.
I will admit, one of my favorite stories that I actually wrote is called A New Life. The main character is basically a science experiment. And she actually gets confronted by the guy who caused it all to her. And she is forced to face him to mainly to protect her kids. And in the end, she kind of more or less sacrifices herself. It's not really like a moment of, holy crap, if I don't do this, I'm gonna die. It's just more of, if I don't do this now, I'm going to lose my chance as well as my life. And she couldn't take the chance anymore to wait. So, and then I reread that, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm actually in the stage of doing that now with something, and it's like, okay, so I'm actually empathizing with this, and I did not intend to.
It sounds like that resonates. Courtney is like, if the character I created can overcome it, I can. That's what I try to do as a reader and writer, which I absolutely love that. And I think maybe that's a thing for a lot of readers or writers. It's almost like our characters and our stories help us show ourselves by externalizing it, that we can solve and overcome the struggles that life poses to us, regardless of the background, right? All the background elements of world building, regardless of the genre, is noise in comparison to the core character journey, because we connect with characters, right? We're not going to connect with the world unless we're connected with the characters in the world. Generally speaking, of course, there's genre and convention trends, but it's really characters is what we resonate with.
The genre and the world, I think, are just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, I think so. And I think genre and world comes into reader preference. And like, it's almost like with your cake, with the cake reference, it's like, what flavor of frosting do you want with your dose of character trauma?
Yeah, I did that. I'd never written anything like, I'd written poetry before, where I kind of just like put my emotions out there in a very kind of naked way, like a blatantly like, not even like artistic way, but just like in a naked way. And that never felt right for me. So when I started writing books, I started writing like apocalyptic fantasies. And so that resonated with like my viewpoints and like my opinions on society. But when I sat down this year, and I had the impulse to really write something that would help me heal a part of myself. And so that's when I wrote Datura's Requiem. And I realized like there was a part of me that had been in these relationships where men consistently did not show up for the relationship. And I didn't want to just barf my feelings on the page like I had with poetry. I really kind of wanted to be more mature about it and understand. So I made the decision to write the book from the point of view of the guy who wasn't showing up. So I wrote it from who ended up, and it's very funny because like I had this idea of what I was going to do with the trauma and how I was going to traumatize my characters before. I mean, it was completely coincidental that he ever ended up in San Francisco anyway. But that's but what he cathartic intention with Datura's Requiem was for me to understand and possibly empathize with the guy who couldn't show up for a relationship. And as I was writing his character and I was putting him through all of these things, in his own past and his own demons and his own inability to kind of fulfill his destiny for finding and saving Ophelia. Well, he had to save himself first. And I realized, like, there was parts of my life I hadn't saved myself. So why am I expecting somebody else to save me when I can't even, put in? It takes work and hard work to really sort of come to terms with where you're at, and then, looking into your own shadows and your own darkness and figuring out, like, bringing that to light, so through the artistic process of taking all of this and creating a mirror universe where I could experience my life through the eyes of the guys that my toxic relationships. I realized they weren't so toxic after all. They were just as, in some ways, and broken as I was. And I was like, okay. And that's why you come to an understanding. There are no villains, except for the bad guy. There is a bad guy, but he's epic bad guy. He's the shadow bad guy. He's the magical evil entity. But but there's, like, the human beings in these stories, like, they all have, everybody always seems, if I write them long enough, seems redeemable. And so, and for me, and that the thing that it helped me do as, like, a person, and through following Sebastian on his journey of, like, saving himself, was realizing, like, everybody that I was blaming for not saving me had their own thing going on. And, like, I can't let them be responsible for my life when they're barely responsible for their own, so, like, that really put a bow, whatever the right metaphor is, like, the clapper went down, the curtains fell, it faded to black, and I realized, like, all of those relationships before, like, it was okay that they didn't show up because they couldn't show up for themselves. And I forgave them. It was a forgiveness a process of forgiving. So that was super cathartic and uncomfortable, and probably the craziest thing I've ever set out to do. And it feels wonderful now to have it out there on paper, and, like, and if it resonates with anybody else who reads it, like, I feel like, part of being a writer and part of doing the journey through the shadows like that is like, just the light at the end of the tunnel is saving yourself, but there's always that hope that somebody else is going to read it and be like, man, I get that. I struggle with the same thing. And that way you give them the intimacy to kind of reckon with their own demons, or realize their own flaws and their own, which we all have. We're flawed, beautifully flawed creatures. And if we can
I absolutely resonate with that, Penelope, and I know our community does as well. I know Lynn was saying all of my trauma ends up sideways into my writing.
Yep.
Mario's like, good point. We can explore their personalities through our characters. When we create characters, we usually base them on what we know. That's what makes good characters relatable.
That's absolutely
true. Very, very powerful. By the way, Nell, welcome to the stream, my friend. Glad to have you. And I always love arguments. I always love opposing viewpoints that challenge my own. Because Gorkon was like, I'd argue the world has just as much importance as everything else. Because it sets a huge majority of emotional and physical setup factors, the world being the systems at play and the world itself.
That's actually a really good point.
So a really interesting point that I think I forgot what author might have been Sanderson, but one of them was saying, like, all right, so let's say you read a story and you have, let's just say, world building, plot, character, right? We'll just use those three examples. A story can have bad world building, it can have bad plot, but if it has incredible characters, you're probably more likely to be interested if the characters are incredible. On the other hand, if a story has bad characters, bad world building, and an incredible plot, probably not going to read it because the characters and plot are missing. But then we go, why? What's that? And then that just leaves, let's say you have incredible world building, bad plot, bad character.
No.
I don't think people will read it just for world building.
No.
I might argue that I might,
Okay.
but that'd be something I'd get from, like, a library and use for, like, studying my own world building. It wouldn't be something that I would actually buy from the shelf.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of an example of a book that has an awesome plot and everything else sucks.
Yeah, because it's always the characters.
I want to watch that. Right? I want to read that. I want to see what that's like.
It's almost always the characters that we remember for the most part, yes. If the other things are struggling. And I think that just goes to show the relevance and importance of characters in comparison to the other elements. They're all absolutely important. As a fantasy reader, I want really cool world building elements. I love world building elements. I love incredible plots. As a writer, I love to create a plot that is intriguing, adventurous, sets up clear enough expectation, and then delivers on the expectation with fun stakes that are unexpected. And then I always love a twist. I always love delivering a twist that feels that the reader doesn't expect, but it feels like it's what was meant to be for the character's journey.
That is the essence of tying up a good plot, to make your ending surprising but inevitable. That's what I always like. That's how I measure all my plots. Is it surprising but inevitable? It's a good plot. It's a good ending.
And this is actually interesting. Gorecorn is like, I'm a DM and a writer who writes the lore of the world around the setting of the world and the powers that be in a check of power balance to chaos. So for me, that is why the world matters so much to me, which actually totally makes sense, especially as a DM. Like that 100% makes sense, because you have to have a believable enough world for your players.
Can I give an example from history right quick that illustrates?
All right, Penelope, give it to us, our historian.
This is really cool though. So like, this is when I was, for those of you who haven't been listening when I've been talking about it, which I don't blame you because it's boring. It's history time. Everybody just tunes out automatically. Cool.
Everybody's like, what's she saying?
You can't even
Yes, ma'am.
So like when I start talking about certain things, like dragons, right now.
When I start pulling on the tweed, it's like, just put a dragon on it, and then I will just everybody's bedtime immediately. Good night, children. Put a dragon on it and some tweed. Anyway, so I was I studied history extensively. I have a degree in it. I was a professor for a while. Blah blah blah, whatever. But I loved culture, and I love society, and I love the environment. Like I was really big on environmental history. Yes, okay. It is the study of how grass grows in the Midwest, but there are some cool things because it does actually very much affect human beings. So here's my and this is a cool example because it's from the past. So the shifting sands of time, woo, 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 and we are in ancient Mesopotamia. All right. Okay. Now I have to do this abbreviated because I haven't told this story in a minute. But there's several cradles of civilization, and they all grow up around rivers, right? Because rivers are harbingers of life and sustenance and sustainability. So let's look at the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and let's look at their gods. And then let's go over to Egypt and look at the Nile and their gods. So in the Tigris and Euphrates, the gods of that region are volatile. They are vindictive. They are unpredictable. They are always clashing with each other. They're always destroying people. They don't care about any blah, 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 rain down terror. So look at their river. The Tigris and Euphrates were always subject to storms. They were always flooding at unpredictable times. They would wipe out villages. It was very chaotic, environmental. I want to say standard, but that's not right. It was a volatile environment, and their gods were also volatile. Could that be a connection? Well, let's look at Egypt. And the Nile was a gentle, slow-flowing river, would flood its banks. They always knew when it was agriculture season, it would flood its banks. It would leave the silt on the river banks, and then it would recede. Same time every year they could farm, and their gods were so much more peaceful and calm, and everything was like, let's go vibe in the afterlife because it's going to be just as cool as it is here. So one of the things that you could suggest from this comparison is that the environment itself is going to factor into how human beings behave. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, sometimes, I mean, even when
I think we can all relate with that. Right? I mean, if we take it to a very like day-to-day level,
yes,
and let's like even say the pandemic, right? COVID 4 years ago,
Yeah.
Everybody here has gone through COVID at this point in time. Through like living through how the world changed. We saw how much people changed by being cooped up inside and how their reality was affected, their day-to-day reality, by just being inside all the time when they weren't used to it.
I saw a huge boom of creativity.
Some people thrived, some
Right.
people didn't thrive, and I think it just depended on who you are. Yeah, I could totally say that.
Yeah, and I mean, even like they say that it's really healthy for children to get out in the environment and to the natural environment, like go visit a farm or get like, especially they used to bus kids out of the city into like the country so they could. There's something about nature, and there's been studies done on this as well, that it is super healthy for your brain to get out of a city environment and go hang out in nature. I mean, like literally hang out in nature every once in a while because it's good for you. So I mean, like the environment, or even like if you want to take it to a more interpersonal, the psychology of the people around you. You are a culmination of the top 5 people you hang out with, is one thing that people say, but there's some validity to it. So you're the environment of the people that you're living around, or the environment of like the noise level, or the environment, is it cloudy? Well, if you're hanging out in Portland, there's differences in murder statistics depending on how much sunshine an area gets. I mean, like there's a lot of different isolation will cause some people to feel very it's very hard on a society to maintain isolation for their citizens for long periods of time because the social fabric starts to break down. All of that has. So when you're using your environment, like, just remember that it can be a reflection of what's going on in your characters.
And I think that I think a lot of people take it for granted as well. Like I think a lot of us take our environmental factors for granted when those are much larger contributing factors to how we're going about our lives.
I think that like some people like, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, Mary was saying it's a bit revealing when people had to spend more time with themselves. Sounds like the nature versus nurture discussion.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
This is a great discussion because this is the same things that our characters have to deal with. This is exactly goes back to character, plot, world building. Can you get away with having bad world, bad plot, but incredible character? That's the most likely one. But a character that is served by the world, like you're gonna love a character in a world where they work hand in hand, right? And I think understanding the nurture versus nature balance for that character, their worldview, and how their worldview is shaped by whatever their day-to-day reality is before the story even starts, can be really powerful.
And I think that's why a lot of people like to write in reality, because they already understand it and they know how to
understand the real world as compared to, I mean, if you're doing a fantasy world, you have to make up a whole set of rules. I mean, there's like so many different elements that you could choose from, right? Whether you're creating societies or like cultures or tribes or dynamics, and there's so many things that go into a world. And I think that's right. It's just a lot more work. It's a lot more work and rule building, and then trying to incorporate that through the character journey.
Yeah, I think that like, yeah, as long as like, if it's something that you wanted to start paying more attention to, just think about how what your character is doing could be reflected in the world. Like I had my Sebastian character had a drug problem, and I put him in 1970s and 80s Hollywood. Perfect place for somebody to, I mean, the environment was already, I knew how, because I've seen a lot of movies in the 80s that took place in the 80s, and I've read some books on it too. So I know that environment, people are going to kind of hear that and they're going to be like, yeah, that's when it's the 80s, that it was snowing everywhere in the 80s, right? But particularly like on the West Coast and the East Coast. So like that makes sense. Like that environment is already feeding into and making worse an addiction that he already had. So like, I mean, it's easy to, especially if you don't mind jumping around in time a little bit, you can find a great environment to torment your characters in. I'm
kind of curious, are all you guys I mean, I was like, yes, I mean, all of us here have written in genres that write in genres where world building takes place outside of the real world. You guys have any tips for any writers in the community when it comes to world building? Since we're kind of like chatting about it, any things that have worked well for you when creating worlds, or creating worlds that work well for your characters?
Soul, don't you look at mythologies, like different mythological structures?
I will say, because I've worked both in fan fiction with working with an existing world and having to build from that, build characters that work with it, and then having to build worlds for my story, for my original stories, all of them. In fact, actually, now that I think about it, I don't think any of them actually exist on Earth as it is. I mean, like literally, I don't think any of them do. All of them are post-apocalyptic or something. But I know in the very first iteration of Pirates, before it was even Pirates, it was actually based in New York. But then I actually changed it. Yeah, I know. It was supposed to be a comic called Lockjaw. Oh. I know, it was weird.
We're talking about okay, yeah, I'm trying to imagine this in New York, and the two do not. No,
yeah, I know. I ended up keeping the core story of the main character goes off to find his dad, but everything else changed. But I know when I first started thinking of Pirates and how that world was supposed to work, my first thought was, do I want this on Earth? Yes or no? It took me 3 days to decide that I did not want this on Earth. I didn't know exactly where I wanted it at the time. I eventually made it. I think at first it was supposed to be like on a different kind of planet, kind of like how The Last Airbender is a different planet kind of situation.
That makes sense.
But it ended up becoming this post-apocalyptic thing, and it worked out so much better because of their genetic abilities that I could work with mutations, I could work with DNA, I could work with how evolution works, and it made sense for their world. And that's because of how I designed the characters, and that's what led me to design that world. It's like, okay, so I designed these characters. I knew for a fact that the main character is going to have this ability to play with fire. There's another character that has the ability to summon lightning. There's a character that can shapeshift. Originally, it was supposed to be like a potion or magic or something, but then I started leaning towards science fiction. It's like, okay, so if I'm going to make the sci-fi, how am I going to make the world match this? And that's what led me to the post-apocalyptic thing. Another one, that's kind of how all my worlds have worked. Is it's all the character design is first, and then I mesh the world around the character into what matches them and where they would fit in best. And that, so at least for me, that's what's worked. And if there's something that doesn't make sense, I'm the kind of person who spends at least 3 days just frying my brain on research on how does the brain work? How does this kind of technology work? Have we actually done something like this? Is this something that has been done in other movies or books? And can I please go and find a free copy of this so I can read it?
Which I absolutely love that.
And it's just, that's what I've done, is just I mesh it around the characters. I think the only exception is and this was actually to a point, is this is not something I've shared with a lot of people, but I've actually created my own species. And cool. I actually created their world first before I created the Ecaldi. And then I created this world, and then I decided to create this creature, this apex creature, which makes humans look like nothing, that matched that world, and it worked out beautifully.
Awesome. Like the environmental historian in me is like, evolution, yay, like perfect.
Oh yeah, no, these things if anyone is familiar with James Cameron's Avatar, the Palaliukans, the Thanators, these things are on the same level as those.
Oh wow, okay.
In fact, Penelope, I think you actually saw one of them in the art channel.
No. I was thinking, like, she said when she said that you'd already kind of come up with a species, I was like, I think I've seen that picture.
Yeah, I came with a species. I came with Sakal's entire culture. I can tell you exactly how her species is designed, how they work biologically and culturally. It is just, I went through a lot of work with that. But the world actually came before her and her kind.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of interesting, because I had to actually design the character for the world rather than the other way around.
And that's so, but that reminds me of like, what do you call it? Those relationships in nature where people symbiotic relationships in nature, like the datura flower is a trumpet style, and it blooms at night, so it attracts the hummingbird moths, which have they're moths, but they have the proboscis that like shoots out so that they can go in and suck the nectar. And they're also like moths, so they're more active at night. So like there's these in nature, you see all these wonderful examples of things that exist in tandem with each other. So I mean, like, so you did that on like a highfalutin genetic level species, but like it's the same thing. Like you've got to understand, like if you're doing like that kind of fantasy or sci-fi, I think would even be anything that you're putting off world. You're going to have to. You should probably. Well, I'm not going to say you're going to have to, because you don't have to listen to me if you don't want to. But like you could consider how like a creature has evolved within that world. Like, is it a predator? Is it prey? Is it, does it, if it's a desert planet, is it a giant worm that goes under the, dune?
I think to a point you do need to have your creatures and characters make at least a little bit of sense with your world. Because I mean, it's one thing if you've got Avatar and you've got these humans going to Pandora, we know they're traveling to a different planet. But if that had not been established, that would have felt so ungodly disconnected and weird, and nobody would have liked it.
Yeah.
So they had to make that kind of a connection. And if you can't make, I think you have to make at least one minor connection between the character and the world itself at minimum. And as long as it makes that tiny itty bitty little bit of sense, you're good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, I think on that note, it's time to use our world building and get some writing done. So let's hop into a writing sprint and see if we can try to get ourselves to get a little bit of writing done. Or like fingers crossed. I believe in ourselves today. We'll check in on our writing progress and see if we're going to get any progress after the sprint. I got 25 minutes set up on the clock, and we're going to be hopping right into it. But before we do, if you're enjoying the stream, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're here every day with the Right Now community. I'm here. The Right Now Writers Group is here every Wednesday. Yeah, whether you're looking for writing motivation, writing help, or you just want to come chat with other writers, we got you covered. So tap those follow and subscribe buttons, and you'll be alerted when we go live. All right, my friends. So I got it all queued up. Whether you want to brainstorm, write, edit, strategize, or maybe just procrastinate, let's see what writing shenanigans we can get into. We got 25 minutes in the clock. I'll throw up some music, and it's time to write now. All right, my friends, that is all for our writing sprint. And it looks like Soul had to leave us a little early, but to come fill Chat Soul's shoes, welcome to the stream, Bobby. Welcome, my friend. Glad you're able to hop in. I'm glad that we have at least one word count master who can who we still have in the chat with us.
Yeah. By the way, hello, Crazy.
That's right. I probably have to like unmute everybody, wouldn't it? All right, there we go.
Hello.
All right, what's up, guys? So, Bobby, I know you came in a little late, but how is we just wrapped up that writing sprint? How's the were you guys able to get any writing in that time? I think I also saw ML hopped in. Yeah. Where any progress on our writing with that sprint, my friends?
Yes, the biggest one of all. For the
I
first
actually just
time
woke up. I fell
ever.
asleep. Yeah.
For the first time ever on this channel, not on the outside, but here on the channel, I finished the book.
What?
With a major cliffhanger that I have finally, after all these other previous books that I have written, we have now finally introduced the biggest baddies of the entire series.
Wow. Crazy. Congrats. That's really cool. Being able to hit a moment like that with like finishing the book and then introducing a huge cliffhanger is so much fun. I love introducing cliffhangers. Oh, cliffhangers are bomb.
That makes me want to write a series of books.
I know, right? I know we're all working on series over here. Penelope, most of your books are series too, aren't they? I was like,
Yeah, but they're each in different genres, so I didn't want to get bored.
Like, all right, guys, I need at least 10 series to choose from. Which one should I write?
All of them.
Oh man, crazy. And everybody's appreciating you here in the chat. I think that's absolutely incredible, my friend. I know, crazy. What was that, Bobby?
I said Crazy's done awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Crazy. Are you most of your books are all in the part of the same series, right? You stick to the same universe? For
the most part, but this is the beginning of another universe.
Ooh, so exciting, my friend. That is awesome. So like thinking about series, and you brought up a really interesting question, which I would love to pose to the community. Cliffhangers, whether that's a cliffhanger at the end of a chapter or a cliffhanger at the end of the book. Do you guys like cliffhangers? Like, is that a thing? Do you think like when you get to the end of a chapter or book, like you get it, you're like, yes, I'm so pissed off that this character, I don't get to learn what happens, but I need to read more. Cliffhangers work for you guys?
I love cliffhangers. The only thing I don't like is like when you start to read a book and you get a favorite character, and then next thing you know, they killed off your favorite character because it's like favorite character.
That's the worst.
Because it's like favorite care dead.
Don't read anything by Gur Martin.
Oh no, do his cliffhanger? Does he kill everybody off?
Yeah, Martin.
Oh, George R. Martin. I like to.
I call him Gur. Sorry, but yeah.
Gur.
What was the joke back in the day? What's his favorite social media platform? Twitter, because there's only 180 characters and he's killed them all. Or something like that. Like, yeah.
Oh, I love that. But as we all know, what Game of Thrones did well was it killed characters in a way that served the core story and subverted expectations. At least the books anyway. So we'll say the books killed characters in a way that was self-serving, which is why it became popular, because it did something new. Because most of our protagonists in our stories get this little thing that we love to hate called plot armor. If you get to book 5, 6, 7, 8 of your series, can you really kill off the core protagonist? Like, can you really kill off your hero if that's who the story is about? Sure. If you live in a fantastical world, kill them off, they can come back and become a force ghost. Or kill them off, they can rise to become the villain. But
Or a dragon.
There we go, Bob.
I was gonna
glad you
say
know.
same thing.
I'm glad you know. All right, guys. So obviously, I don't have to
had
leave you
say
guys
that just
waiting.
for you, Kaufman.
When the last Scarecrow ends, if he dies, he's gonna come back as a dragon. I'll just like spoiler warning now.
Perfect. Actually, now you have to do that.
Yep.
Like, who was Scarecrow all along? He was always a dragon.
There's always a dragon.
Honestly, in my opinion, though, as much as I know cliffhangers can be kind of a good thing for chapter-wise, I think it brings more oomph to the story if it's at the end, because then you're like, what's gonna happen?
Yes.
What's he doing over there? What's she gonna do? I guess you'll have to find out when the next one comes out. It's that big oomph moment of, oh man, that what's gonna happen, man. It makes the other book that
It's
comes
like,
out
I've got this
that
book.
much more rewarding to get.
When
Sorry, go ahead.
crazy with what type of cliffhanger? Like when you said when it's at the end of the book?
Yes, when it's at the end, and that's when most people, kind of freak out, like what's gonna happen with these people, with these characters. That's when has more oomph to that book, because when the next story comes out, then you feel even more rewarding. That's like, yes, I finally get to solve the puzzle. Is what's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the most best and frustrating things for readers, right? Of course, when you get then you got to wait for the next one to find out what happened. In chapters, yes, only at the end of the book. When is the next book going to be out? Then I want to know the next book, especially when the ending is a cliffhanger itself. Yes. And I think this brings up a really good point. I was listening to I forgot who it was, but they were talking about cliffhangers at stories. And there's two types of cliffhangers. There's the type of cliffhanger where, and this could be at the end of a chapter, at the end of a book, either or. So two types of cliffhangers. One, which is used most often, especially with film and television. But this is technically stealing tension from the moment. This is when there's an action and the end of the chapter of the book ends in the middle of the action. And then the mystery of the cliffhanger is what happened and the rest of the action. This is like in TV series when they show off the main villain of the next series in the last clip of a scene, but it doesn't really do anything for the core for that season, but it's a hook for the next one. The character walks up and like they pull out a knife and then cut to black till next season. I think it's debatable on whether or not this is what's most used, because I think this is what we're used to. But technically what's happening is you're cutting off something in the middle and then you're stealing the rest of tension from something that's ongoing. As compared to there's an event that happens and then the cliffhanger is what is the next event that's going to happen. Like someone gets killed off, right? So let's say your main character dies. That's the end of the cliffhanger. And then the story is like, oh, but the world's still in peril. Then the cliffhanger could be, well, what's going to happen with the main character is dead now, right? That would be a cliffhanger where it's not stealing tension from the core from the original one. I'm not sure what's right or wrong, but it's just a different style. But readers tend to gravitate towards the tension being stolen from the middle of an action.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I hate cliffhangers. I absolutely hate, because they make me so mad. Like it affects my sanity when people like put a cliffhanger out there. And I've also had authors die in the middle of a series. So or not finish them. So I with all that in mind, when I decided to do my books, my cliffhangers, how I like to write tension is to write really weird foreshadowing scenes. I'd rather give people a WTF moment, and then at the end of the book, even though it's an ongoing series, it follows different characters every book. So there's closure at the end. So I feel like I want to stress you out during the book and then make you feel better at the end. Like that's, I mean, just simply because like I will never know how this series ends, and Robert Anton Wilson never finished it, and now I'm like, okay. And also my problem is I introduced the idea of reincarnation, so nobody actually dies because they just
right. And I mean, then when you have mechanics like that, you have to set stakes differently, right? So then if death has no meaning, then generally with reincarnation type character arcs or worlds, then really the stakes are like the damnation or the losing of the soul, or the stakes become greater if you can just come back to life.
Mine is a little different because I ended up doing like, there's a group of individuals who are caught in the human karmic cycle and incarnate until they figure their destiny out, and then they like ascend to this particular group. So like the problem is they haven't all ascended yet. So like
makes sense.
So the story follows like the ascension of these different characters, and the group gets bigger and bigger as the story goes on. But like I left the last one for the ending.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because ML hits on this. I like when they're resolved. I hit when cliffhangers never get resolved, and then that happens with TV shows, and the TV show gets canceled.
Yeah,
that is the thing that sucks, right?
Yes,
especially if it's a good TV show. That is frustrating, and outside of the creator's control usually.
Yeah,
Courtney's like, my luck isn't that good. I freak out thinking, what if something happens to the author, and I'll never know. You know, I think one of the my favorite examples for an author passing away for a very predominant series is the Wheel of Time series. Anyone who is a fantasy fan knows that Wheel of Time is probably one of the most notable epic fantasy series of all time. And he's probably one of the best. Robert Jordan was absolutely one of the best, hands down, at creating a cast of, I think it was like well over 100 characters throughout the 12-book series. And I was like, but the character development was awesome. But Robert Jordan passed away during book, I think it was book 10 was out. And the series wasn't finished. He passed away from cancer. After he passed away, his wife, who was the head of one of the major who was the, I think, editor-in-chief of one of the major publishing companies, they ended up hiring Brandon Sanderson to finish the series, of which, because he was a fan, he wrote the last 3 books of the series that finished the storytelling, the core that was able to serve the fan base for a very popular series.
Yeah.
There is a book out. The title is escaping me at the moment, but there is a book out that was written by a doctor, and he ended up with cancer and ended up dying. So it goes, and his wife took over the book. So, you know, his wife is well known for it, but which he is too, because it's under his name. But it is a phenomenal book. I cannot think of the title right now, but it's phenomenal. I read it. I love it. And it goes from his perspective on having had cancer to now her perspective on her husband having and now dying from the cancer.
It's interesting.
And the title is escaping me at the moment, but anyway.
No, I mean, I totally, I could totally resonate thinking that if I'm writing in the middle of like a book or series, I'm like, well, what if something happens to me? Right? Like, I want my series to be finished. That happens to authors. It's a nature of life. So I think then the best you can do is just be prepared with notes for series. Yeah, I mean, it really is the best you can do. Otherwise, the series gets left hanging in the air. Yeah, I think if something happened to me, and I think if I was far enough in a series, I would just like tell my family, be like, all right, just hire somebody to write the last book. Finish the story. At least just finish the story. Don't like leave the story hanging in because of me.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be my hope.
Yeah.
But I think on that excellent note, let's hop back into a second writing sprint. Let's get some more writing in. So guys, feel free to come join us. Brainstorm writing, editing, transcribing, poetry, whatever comes to mind. Let's get a little bit more words in. Second writing sprint. I believe in us. And let's do it. Let's try to get some words. Bobby will try to beat you on word count today. And we'll see.
Not gonna happen.
Bobby's like, nope. So we'll see what craziness we can get into. Writing sprint number 2. We got 25 minutes on the clock, and it's time. Let's get this to write now.
And I like the background picture you chose, by the way.
Aw, thanks, Bobby. Appreciate it. All right, my friends. Welcome back from the sprint. Were you guys able to make some progress that time?
I just mostly did a cover for the new book I'm gonna write, so I didn't really do much.
You're like you finished. I feel like you made such a huge milestone accomplishment today that you're like, give yourself a little breather.
Yeah, especially given the fact of how long it took, which you know all
Yeah.
about. But
Uh,
it felt good. But it's like, all right, take a breather. Let's go.
Oh, that's awesome. I was working. I'm editing, so I don't really have much of a word count. So I don't have anything.
We have
to
a
share.
word count queen, however.
I know. Oh man. Who? What? Penelope, were you
Megan.
able to make any progress?
Yeah,
I made
Megan.
doodles.
Woo! All right, guys. Penelope
Megan
wins.
is our new word count queen.
Bobby, what'd you get?
Megan is a new word count queen.
Oh,
Megan
did Megan
is our
win
new
it?
word count queen.
Ooh, okay. Let me go hop into the chat. What did we got? In total, Megan, I did about 18,000 tonight during the stream and the sprint. Oh my goodness, that's pretty incredible. You had 18,000? Wait, no, 1,800. 18,000. 1,800.
I'm confused now.
1800.
I was like, I thought that has to be 1,800. 18,000 would be really good. I was like, I don't even know if you could do 18,000 during that time. I don't even know if
1800,
Chat Soul's able to do that.
I did
would
that
be
once.
pretty cool.
If I just didn't stop and type for 2 hours straight, I'm like, yeah, I was like, I don't know what the fastest. I was like, but still, that's really good. Even if it's 1,800, like 1,800 in the amount of time that we've been streaming is really, really good.
Yeah.
It's a great. That's averaging about just under about 1,900 to 1,000 words an hour, which is that's bomb.com. You guys see what I do. I get like 300 to 400 word sprints when I'm trying. So that is very, very cool. Sounds like we've gotten some good work here. Bobby, were you able to make any progress on your end?
A little bit. I got distracted in the comments by Megan, the word count thief.
It happens.
kidding,
Okay, Megan
Megan.
was like, yes, 1,800. Well, you still get the crown, Megan.
I'm kidding,
You definitely
Megan.
still
Yes.
get the crown, hands down. Courtney's like, I got progress in my video download, 81%. You know what? Slowly but surely. My internet's been messing with me today. So Megan takes all the crowns.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad that you guys were able to make some progress today. Sounds like once again another fun writing stream, writing sprint, writer's session, as today is meeting 21. Guys, thanks all for joining me today. I feel like we've had some great conversations on genre, cliffhangers, world building, the complexities of being a writer and writing things. We've definitely done some great things today. Thank you all for joining us today. Those of you know, I'll be back. What's that? Tomorrow's Thursday. I will be back tomorrow for 2 p.m. Pacific, 2, 3, 4, 5 p.m. Eastern. Thanks all for joining us. Make sure, I highly encourage you, if you're hanging out in the chat and you ever want to come hang out with us on stream, drop a comment, let me know, and come join us next week. Come hop on the camera. I love it. I love to see all you guys join us. And remember, if you're ever stuck, put a dragon on it. All right, my friends. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Kaufman, and this is
Penelope.
and this is
Crazy root beer.
and we'll catch you on the next stream.